Lena was a small girl with big, curious eyes and messy brown curls that always escaped from her ponytail. She lived with her mother, Maria, in a tiny one-room apartment behind the old market. Their room had only one window and a small stove that barely worked. But even in their simple home, Lena always found something to smile about. The sound of rain hitting the window, the smell of fresh bread from the shop below, and most of all, the faint notes of music coming from her neighbor's radio. Her mother worked as a cleaner and helper for the Hamilton family, one of the richest families in the city. Their mansion stood on a hill surrounded by iron gates and tall trees. Every morning, Maria would wake up before sunrise, tie her hair back, and take the bus to the mansion. Sometimes when she couldn't find anyone to watch Lena, she would take her along. "You must stay quiet, Lena," she always whispered. "Rich people don't like noise." Lena would nod, but her eyes always wandered. Everything inside that mansion looked like a dream. Shining marble floors, tall mirrors, golden lamps, and paintings that seemed to watch her as she passed. But her favorite thing of all was the grand piano that sat in the center of the ballroom. It was huge, shiny, and beautiful, with black and white keys that seemed to call her name. Whenever she got the chance, Lena would sneak into the ballroom when no one was there. She would sit on the edge of the piano stool, close her eyes, and imagine she could play the way she had seen on television. Soft, graceful music that made people smile and cry. She didn't know how to read music, but she remembered small tunes her father had hummed before he passed away. Those memories lived inside her like hidden songs waiting to be heard. One chilly evening, Maria told her something unusual. "The Hamiltons are hosting a big party tomorrow night," she said while folding her uniform. "A charity event. Many important people will come." Lena's eyes widened. "A party? With music?" "Yes," her mother sighed. "A big one. The mayor will be there, even famous singers. I'll be busy cleaning before and after. He'll have to stay quiet again." Lena nodded, pretending to be serious, but inside her heart fluttered with excitement. She imagined sparkling dresses, laughter, and most of all, someone playing that grand piano. The next day, while her mother worked in the kitchen, Lena wandered around the edges of the ballroom. Workers were rushing everywhere, decorating tables, polishing glasses, arranging flowers. The chandelier lights glittered like stars. She could smell perfume and hear laughter already coming from the hallway. The place looked magical, like something out of a movie she could never afford to see. When the evening arrived, the guests began to enter. Long cars stopped at the gates, and men in suits helped ladies in shiny gowns step out. Everyone looked perfect, like they belonged to another world, one where no one ever worried about rent, or cold nights, or empty plates. Lena watched them from behind the curtain near the piano, her small hands gripping the fabric. She shouldn't have been there. Her mother would scold her if she found out, but she couldn't help it. She wanted to see, to feel, to hear everything. She wanted to know what it was like to be among people who wore diamonds instead of dreams. Suddenly, a group of musicians entered with their instruments. One man sat at the piano. Lena's eyes followed every move of his fingers, the way they danced lightly across the keys, making the whole room come alive. It was like magic. For a few minutes, she forgot everything, the rules, her fear, even herself. But then the music stopped. The man stood up, laughing with another musician, and they walked toward the buffet table. The piano sat there, silent and alone, its keys shining under the golden lights. Lena's heart began to race. She looked around. No one was watching. The guests were busy talking, their backs turned. The air smelled of roses and roasted food. It was the perfect moment, the kind that would never come again. Her feet moved before her mind did. Step by step, she walked toward the piano. Her shoes made no sound on the soft carpet. She reached out her hand and touched the cool, smooth surface of the instrument. It felt alive under her fingers. She sat down on the edge of the stool, just for a second, she told herself, just to feel what it was like. Her reflection in the black surface looked small and scared. She placed one trembling finger on a key and pressed. A single note rang out, soft, pure, and clear. It was like a drop of water falling into silence. She pressed another key, then another. Slowly, a gentle tune began to form, one she had heard her father hum long ago when the lights went out and the world outside was dark. She smiled, her fear melting away with every note. But what she didn't realize was that someone had noticed her. Someone important. At that moment, the laughter in the room faded. Heads turned. People began to whisper. The musicians paused mid-conversation. Lena didn't see them. She was lost in the music, and just like that, what began as a secret moment turned into the beginning of something no one, not even Lena herself, could have ever imagined. Because the invitation to this grand event had never been hers. But destiny had just written her name on it. The golden lights from the chandeliers shimmered across the ballroom, bouncing off glass walls and polished shoes. Laughter echoed like music itself, blending with the soft clinking of glasses. Everywhere Lena looked, she saw people who seemed perfect. Their clothes, their smiles, even the way they moved. It was a world built out of money and manners, and she felt smaller with every passing minute. Her mother was in the kitchen now, helping the other maids prepare trays of desserts. If Maria saw her daughter anywhere near the piano, she would be terrified. But Lena couldn't take her eyes off the place. The room was like a dream painted in gold, but also a little cold, like the kind of beauty that didn't need warmth. From her hiding spot behind the long velvet curtains, Lena watched as the guests talked about things she didn't understand. Business, travel, expensive art, and names she had never heard before. They laughed loudly at stories that didn't sound funny, and when one person spoke, the others nodded politely as if everything said there was important. Then came the music again. A tall man in a white tuxedo sat at the piano. He was handsome and confident, and when he smiled, people turned their heads to watch. Lena had seen him before. He was Mr. Hamilton, the owner of the mansion. His fingers glided over the keys, playing a tune full of joy and energy. The crowd clapped softly, admiring his skill. But to Lena, something was missing. The music sounded beautiful, yes, but not alive. It was practiced, perfect, and polite, but it didn't make her feel anything. It was like someone smiling without their eyes. When he finished, people cheered. Mr. Hamilton stood and bowed lightly, waving at his guests. A waiter rushed to offer him a glass of champagne, and the music stopped once more. The piano sat there silent again, its black surface gleaming under the lights. Lena's heart thumped. Her mind told her to stay hidden. But her heart, the same heart that always beat faster when she heard a tune, whispered just one more time. Slowly, she slipped out from behind the curtain and walked closer to the piano. No one noticed her at first. The guests were busy taking pictures and laughing. The sound of heels clicking on the marble floor covered her small footsteps. When she reached the piano, she felt the same pull as before, like it was calling her name. She looked around once more. The crowd was facing the other way. She climbed carefully onto the stool and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note was soft, almost hidden beneath the chatter. Then another. Then another. She played slowly, her tiny hands trembling. But this time the notes carried something new. Courage. The tune she played wasn't from a book or a teacher. It was a song her father had made up years ago when he fixed an old keyboard he'd found in the trash. He used to hum it while cooking or telling her bedtime stories. It was simple but full of love, like a lullaby that could chase away sadness. As she played, the sound began to rise above the noise of the party. One by one, people started turning around. "Who's that?" Someone whispered. "Is that a child?" Another murmured. The room slowly grew quieter. The laughter faded. Lena didn't notice. Her eyes were closed, her body swaying slightly with the music. The song grew stronger, joyful, sorrowful, alive. The kind of melody that didn't need words. When she opened her eyes again, she saw dozens of faces staring at her. Her hands froze midair. For a heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. In front of her stood Mr. Hamilton, still in his white tuxedo, one eyebrow raised. His expression was hard to read. Not angry, but not smiling either. Lena quickly stood up from the stool, her cheeks burning red. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." But before she could finish, Mr. Hamilton lifted his hand, signaling her to stop. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes studying her face. Then, in a calm, deep voice, he said, "You play very beautifully. What's your name?" Lena blinked. She wasn't sure if she was in trouble or not. "Lena," she whispered. "My mama works here." A few guests chuckled softly. One woman whispered to another, "How adorable." Another said, "Let her play again." Lena's hands fidgeted nervously. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have." But Mr. Hamilton's smile returned, softer this time. "Nonsense. Talent deserves to be heard," he said. Then, turning to the crowd, he added, "Shall we hear another? Shall we hear another?" The guests clapped politely. Some even cheered. Lena looked at the piano, then back at Mr. Hamilton. Her heart raced. She wanted to run, but something in his voice and something kind and encouraging gave her courage. She sat down again. Her small fingers hovered over the keys. The room was silent now, all eyes on her. She took a deep breath and began to play once more. The melody was different this time, bolder, freer. It was her father's song again, but she played it as if she owned it now. Every note sparkled under the chandeliers floating through the golden air. And when the last note faded, the silence that followed was so deep that even the sound of breathing could be heard. Then, applause. Loud, thunderous applause. People stood clapping, cheering, smiling. Some even had tears in their eyes. Lena looked around in disbelief. Her hands were still trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something else. Pride. At the back of the room, her mother stood frozen, a tray in her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. Lena had no invitation to the Millionaire's party, but that night, she had become the reason it was unforgettable. Lena couldn't sleep that night. Even when she closed her eyes, the sound of applause kept echoing in her ears. The faces of those rich people, amazed, smiling, clapping, flashed before her like a dream she didn't want to end. She lay beside her mother on the small bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of their apartment. The sound of traffic from the street mixed with the memory of the piano keys. Her fingers still tingled as if the notes were hiding under her skin. Her mother turned toward her. "You were very brave, Lena," she said softly. Her voice was full of love and worry at the same time. "But you scared me half to death. You could have gotten me fired." Lena's smile faded a little. "I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to hear it, just once." Maria sighed and pulled her daughter close. "You played beautifully." Everyone said so. Even Mr. Hamilton told me he was impressed. "But Lena, that's not our world. We clean their floors, not sit at their piano." Lena didn't answer. She understood what her mother meant, but part of her heart didn't agree. Maybe she didn't belong to that world. But for a few minutes when she played, it had belonged to her. The next morning, Maria went to work as usual. Lena stayed behind, sitting by the window with an old notebook in her lap. She didn't have a piano, but she drew one, key by key, and then pretended to play. Her fingers tapped the paper softly, making invisible music. At noon, her mother returned early, her face pale but her eyes bright. "Lena," she said breathlessly, "Mr. Hamilton wants to see you." Lena froze. "See me? Why?" He didn't say. "He just told me to bring you this evening. Wear something clean." Lena's heart raced. Half of her wanted to hide. The other half, the braver, more curious half, couldn't wait. That evening, the mansion looked quieter than usual. The grand ballroom, which last night had been filled with laughter and lights, was now almost empty. Only a few lamps glowed softly, their light reflecting on the shiny piano. Mr. Hamilton was sitting near the window reading a newspaper. He looked up when they entered. "Ah, Lena," he said kindly. "Come in." Maria bowed her head slightly. "Good evening, sir. I'm sorry about yesterday." He raised his hand gently. "No apologies, Maria. Your daughter didn't do anything wrong. In fact," he turned to Lena. "She reminded us all what real music sounds like." Lena's eyes widened. "Real music?" she repeated quietly. "Yes," he said with a smile. "The kind that comes from the heart." He stood up and walked toward the piano. "Tell me, Lena, where did you learn to play like that?" "I didn't learn," she said honestly. "My papa used to play a little on an old keyboard. I just remembered the songs." Mr. Hamilton nodded thoughtfully. "You have a gift," he said. "A rare one. How would you like to learn properly?" Maria gasped. "Sir, we can't afford lessons." He smiled again. "Who said anything about paying?" "I'll cover it. She can come here twice a week. My friend teaches music, one of the best in the city. If she's willing to learn, I'll arrange everything." Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You mean I can really learn to play? On this piano?" "Yes," he said warmly. "But only if you promise to practice, study, and never stop believing you belong here, no matter what anyone says." Tears filled Maria's eyes. She pressed her hands together. "Thank you, sir. You don't know what this means to us." Mr. Hamilton looked at Lena. Talent should never stay hidden because of money. You proved something last night, and to all of us. Lena felt her throat tighten. All she could manage was a small nod. From that day on, everything changed. Every Tuesday and Friday, Lena would arrive at the mansion after school. She wore the same faded blue dress, always washed and neatly ironed by her mother. The music teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Evans, would greet her at the door with a smile. At first, the lessons were hard. Lena's fingers often stumbled over the keys. The letters and symbols on the music sheets made her dizzy. But she never gave up. Every mistake pushed her to try again. Sometimes she stayed long after the lesson was over, practicing while the sun set behind the tall windows. Her tiny hands would ache, but her heart felt lighter each time she played. The servants began to whisper about her. The little maid's daughter who played like an angel. Even the guests who visited the mansion started asking about her. One evening, while she practiced alone, Mr. Hamilton entered quietly. He listened from the doorway. When she finished, he clapped softly. "Lena," he said, "do you know why I asked you to play that night?" She shook her head. He smiled. "Because you reminded me of my own daughter. She loved music too. But she passed away years ago. When I heard you play, it felt like she was in the room again." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what to say, so she just whispered, "I'm sorry." He nodded gently. "Don't be. You brought music back into this house. That's something even money couldn't do." Lena smiled shyly. For the first time, she understood that her music wasn't just about notes or keys. It was about feeling. It connected hearts that had been silent for too long. As she left the mansion that evening, the lights from the ballroom followed her out like stars. She looked back once and whispered to herself, "Someday I'll play here again. Not as a guest. Not as a servant's daughter, but as someone they'll come to hear." The night breeze carried her words away. But the dream stayed, bright and alive, waiting for its next chapter. Days turned into weeks, and Lena's music lessons became the brightest part of her life. Every time she entered the grand mansion, she felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, as if she was walking into a dream she didn't want to wake up from. The servants had stopped whispering about her now. They smiled and greeted her as if she belonged there. Mrs. Evans, her teacher, often told her, "Music doesn't care where you come from, Lena. It only listens to your heart." And Lena believed her. Her fingers were getting stronger, her ears sharper. She learned to read the black notes on white paper, and each lesson brought her closer to the kind of music she had once only imagined. But one day, Mrs. Evans brought unexpected news. "Lena," she said, setting a new sheet of music on the piano, "there's going to be a concert here at the mansion next month. All my students will perform, and Mr. Hamilton wants you to play too." Lena's mouth fell open. "Me? But—" "I'm not ready," Mrs. Evans smiled. "You're more ready than you think. You'll play one solo piece, your own version of that melody you love, the one your father used to hum." Lena's heart pounded. The idea of playing in front of people again, not just guests at a party, but real musicians and important people, scared her. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed this time instead of clapping? That night she told her mother everything. Maria stopped washing dishes and stared at her daughter. "A concert? You'll play in front of everyone again?" Lena nodded. "Mr. Hamilton said it'll be big. They'll even record it." Her mother wiped her hands and hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you, my little star. But promise me something. No matter what happens, stay humble. Remember who you are." "I promise," Lena whispered. The next few weeks were tough. Every day after school she rushed to the mansion and practiced until her fingers ached. Mrs. Evans corrected her posture, her rhythm, her tone, over and over. Some days Lena felt she could never get it right. One evening, as she practiced alone, she missed a key and groaned. Tears stung her eyes. "I can't do it," she whispered. "I'm just a maid's daughter. What am I doing here?" Mr. Hamilton had entered the room quietly and heard her. He walked closer and said softly, "Do you think the piano cares who plays it?" Lena turned, startled. "Sir, He smiled. "When I was your age, I played worse than you. My father said I'd never be good enough. But I didn't stop. Music isn't about being perfect, Lena, it's about being true." She nodded slowly, his words sinking deep into her heart. "Finally, The night of the concert arrived. The ballroom looked more beautiful than ever. Glowing chandeliers, shining marble, and rows of golden chairs filled with elegantly dressed guests. A stage had been built near the piano, surrounded by white roses. Lena stood backstage, her heart hammering so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Evans had bought her. It wasn't expensive, but it made her feel special, like she belonged among the bright lights. Mrs. Evans placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Just breathe, Lena. Don't play for them. Play for yourself. Play for your father." Lena nodded, clutching her trembling hands together. From behind the curtain, she could hear the other students performing. Their songs were fast, professional, perfect. The audience clapped politely after each one. But Lena noticed something. None of those performances made people feel. Finally, it was her turn. The announcer said her name. "Next, we have a special performance by a young talent. Miss Lena." She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding her for a moment. She could barely see the crowd, but she could feel their attention, heavy and expectant. She sat at the piano. Her feet barely reached the pedals. Her hands hovered above the keys, shaking. For a moment, her mind went blank. She couldn't remember the first note. Panic rose in her chest. Then she heard her mother's voice in her memory. "Stay humble, my little star." And Mr. Hamilton's "Music is about being true." She took a deep breath. Her fingers pressed the first key. The sound that came out was soft, trembling, but real. She closed her eyes and let her heart lead. Slowly the song grew stronger. It wasn't perfect. She missed a note here and there, but no one cared. The melody carried something pure, love, pain, hope. As she played, the crowd disappeared. She wasn't in the mansion anymore. She was in her small apartment, sitting with her father, listening to him hum that same tune. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her fingers never stopped. When the last note faded into silence, the whole room was still, then a sound like thunder. Applause erupted, louder than before, echoing through the walls. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Mrs. Evans was smiling proudly. Mr. Hamilton had tears in his too. Lena bowed her head, overwhelmed. For the second time in her life, she had turned a room full of strangers into believers. Later that night, as she stood outside the mansion looking up at the stars, she whispered, "Papa, I did it." A soft wind brushed her face, almost like a reply. She smiled, knowing deep inside that this was just the beginning, that her story was far from over, and her biggest challenge was yet to come. The morning after the concert, Lena woke up to the sound of her mother humming softly in the kitchen. The air smelled of toast and tea. Sunlight peeked through their small window, falling across the cracked floor. It felt like any other morning, but it wasn't. Something had changed. When Lena walked outside, people in the neighborhood were already talking about her. "Did you hear? The maid's daughter played at the Millionaire's house," one woman said. "She's going to be famous one day," another whispered. Lena felt shy but happy. It was strange hearing her name spoken like that. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. When she arrived at the mansion that afternoon, the servants smiled and congratulated her. Even the guards nodded with respect. But when she reached the ballroom, she noticed something different. The piano, which usually felt like her friend, now looked bigger, heavier somehow. Mrs. Evans was waiting with her usual warm smile. "You were wonderful, Lena. The whole city's talking about you. Even the newspaper mentioned a young girl with the heart of music." Lena's eyes widened. "Really?" Mrs. Evans handed her a folded newspaper. There it was, a small picture of her sitting at the piano, her fingers midair, eyes closed in concentration. Underneath it read, "Unexpected talent shines at Hamilton Mansion." Her hands trembled as she held it. She had never been in a newspaper before, but not everyone was pleased. A few of Mrs. Evans's older students, girls from rich families who had also played that night, had gathered near the door, whispering. One of them, Clara, stepped forward with a polite but cold smile. "You were good. For someone who doesn't even own a piano," she said. The others giggled softly. Lena's face turned red. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure how to respond. Clara tilted her head. "I suppose anyone can be lucky once, but it takes real skill to keep up." Mrs. Evans frowned. "That's enough, Clara." But the girl just shrugged and left with her friends. Lena looked down at the floor. The joy she'd felt a moment ago vanished like smoke. After that day, practice became harder. Not because she didn't love it, but because doubt had crept into her heart. She started to question herself. Was her performance just luck? Did she really deserve to be there among those students with shiny shoes and perfect manners? Some days her hands shook so much that she hit wrong notes again and again. "Breathe, Lena," Mrs. Evans would say gently. "You're trying too hard. Music isn't a battle. It's a voice." But it didn't help. One afternoon, after everyone left, Lena stayed behind to practice alone. Tears ran down her cheeks as she pressed the keys. Each note sounded heavy, like it was fighting her. Then she heard someone clapping softly. She turned around. Mr. Hamilton was standing near the door, smiling gently. "Still here?" he asked. Lena quickly wiped her face. I can't play it right anymore." He walked closer. "You know, when people start talking about you, it means you've done something worth noticing." "But they don't like me," she said, her voice small. "They think I don't belong." Mr. Hamilton looked at her for a long moment, then sat beside her on the piano bench. "Let me tell you a secret," he said quietly. "I was poor once too. My first piano was a box with painted keys. People laughed at me. But one day I decided their laughter didn't matter. What mattered was how much I loved to play." Lena stared at him in surprise. "You were poor?" He nodded. "Money doesn't decide how high you can go, Lena. Only your heart does." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now play for me. Not for them. Not even for your teacher. Just for yourself." Lena hesitated, then nodded. She closed her eyes and began to play the same melody again, soft and full of emotion. The notes flowed easily this time, as if the piano understood her sadness and wanted to comfort her. When she finished, Mr. Hamilton smiled. "There you are," he said. "That's the Lena everyone heard that night." The next week, Mrs. Evans announced something surprising. "There will be another performance, competition," she said. "Each student will play in front of judges. The winner gets a scholarship to the city's best music academy." The room buzzed with excitement. Clara smirked at Lena. "Looks like we'll see who really belongs," she said under her breath. Lena's heart thudded. A scholarship? That could change her life, help her mother, help her dream. But the fear was back too. That night, she told her mother. Maria listened quietly, then said, "You've already won." "Lena, not because of a prize, but because you're brave enough to try." Lena nodded, holding her mother's hand. "I'll try, Mama, I promise." In the following days, she practiced harder than ever. She woke before sunrise, humming the melody as the city still slept. Every mistake made her more determined. Every tear fell like rain that helped her grow. But as the day of the competition approached, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Do I really belong? She didn't know yet that this challenge would test not just her music, but her faith in herself, her courage, and the heart that had carried her from a tiny apartment to a grand piano. The day of the competition arrived faster than Lena expected. For weeks she had practiced from morning until night, fingers aching, eyes tired, but her heart full of determination. The City Music Academy, the place where the contest would be held, looked nothing like her world. It was a tall glass building with golden doors and shiny marble floors. Every corner smelled like polish and perfume. Lena walked in beside her mother, holding her small bag tightly. Inside it was her sheet music, slightly crumpled from being read so many times. Her mother had borrowed a simple white dress from a friend for her to wear. It wasn't fancy, but Lena wore it proudly. Around them stood children from rich families, dressed in expensive clothes, carrying confidence like a crown. Their parents spoke loudly, praising their children's talents. Lena and her mother stood quietly in the corner, unnoticed. Then Clara arrived. She was wearing a glittering pink gown and holding her head high. When she saw Lena, she smiled in that same polite but sharp way. "Oh, you came," she said softly. "That's brave." Lena forced a small smile. "Good luck," she said. "Thanks," Clara replied. "You'll need it more than I do." Maria placed her hand on Lena's shoulder. "Don't listen," she whispered. "Just play from your heart." Inside the auditorium, the air felt heavy with nerves. The audience filled the seats, teachers, judges, and guests, including Mr. Hamilton and Mrs. Evans. A grand piano stood at the center of the stage, shining under the lights like a jewel. The competition began. One by one, the students performed. Some were excellent, perfect posture, perfect timing, every note flawless. But Lena noticed something. Though their fingers were fast, their music felt empty, like it had been practiced 100 times but never truly lived. Finally, the announcer called, "Contestant number 12, Lena." She took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. Her legs felt like jelly, her hands cold. The lights were blinding. Somewhere in the crowd she spotted her mother's worried face and Mr. Hamilton's gentle nod. She sat at the piano. For a moment her heart raced so fast she thought she might faint. Then she remembered her father's voice, soft and distant. "When you play, don't think. Feel." Her fingers touched the keys. The first note was soft, trembling like a whisper. Then another and another, trembling like a whisper. Then another and another. Slowly the melody filled the hall. The same tune she had played at the Millionaire's party. The song of her life. This time, it sounded richer, deeper. It told her story, of small rooms, rainy nights, laughter and poverty, and a dream that refused to die. The judges leaned forward. The audience grew still. Even the light seemed to soften as if listening. When the last note faded, silence wrapped the room, and then applause. Real powerful applause. Mrs. Evans smiled proudly. Mr. Hamilton stood up clapping. Even some of the rich parents wiped their eyes. For the first time, Lena felt something stronger than fear. Belonging. After the final performance, all the contestants waited nervously backstage as the judges decided. Clara sat beside her, arms crossed, pretending not to look worried. When the results were announced, everyone held their breath. In third place, Clara Johnson. Clara blinked, her smile fading slightly. In second place, Matthew Price. Lena's heart pounded. She gripped her dress tightly. And in first place, the announcer continued, pausing for effect, Lena, for her original performance and emotional expression. For a second, she didn't believe it. She stood frozen until Mrs. Evans gently pushed her forward. The crowd erupted in applause. Mr. Hamilton smiled proudly. Her mother cried openly, clapping with both hands. Lena walked up to the stage, her eyes full of tears. A golden certificate was placed in her hands. The announcer said, "A scholarship to the City Music Academy." Lena looked at her mother in the audience, both of them smiling through tears. Later that evening, after the ceremony, Clara approached her backstage. Her face was pale, but her tone was calm. "You played beautifully," she said quietly. Lena blinked, surprised. "Thank you," Clara sighed. "I still think I'm better technically, but you make people feel. That's something you can't learn from books." Lena smiled gently. "Maybe one day we'll play together." Clara gave a small nod and walked away, leaving Lena standing there, still holding the golden certificate like it was a piece of the sun. When she returned home that night, her mother hugged her tightly. "You did it, my daughter," she whispered, voice trembling. "You showed them that dreams don't need money, just courage." Lena closed her eyes, listening to the quiet hum of the city. "Mama," she said softly, "one day I'll play in places bigger than this. But I'll always play for you and for Papa." Maria smiled through her tears. "I know you will." That night, Lena sat by the window with the certificate on her lap. She looked at the stars above, thinking about everything that had happened. The fear, the pain, the applause. Somewhere in the distance, she imagined her father's voice again, gentle and proud. And in that moment, she realized the melody she played wasn't just music. It was her life turned into sound. Every struggle, every tear, every heartbeat had become a song the world could finally hear. That night, after everyone had left the auditorium, the stage lights were dim, and the sound of clapping still echoed in Lena's heart. She stood there alone for a moment, looking at the piano, the same piano that had made her dream come true. It looked peaceful now, like a friend resting after a long journey. Her mother came up behind her and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. "It's late, Lena, let's go home." Lena turned and smiled. "Just 1 minute, Mama. I want to remember this." She walked to the piano and gently pressed one key. The soft note floated into the empty hall and faded slowly, leaving behind silence, a deep, beautiful silence. It was the kind that didn't feel empty. It felt complete. The next morning, the world already knew her name. Newspapers called her the miracle girl at the piano. People shared her story, the poor girl who had played her way into the hearts of the rich. At school, her classmates looked at her differently. Some congratulated her. Others stared from a distance as if she had turned into someone new. But Lena didn't feel different inside. She still woke up early, helped her mother wash dishes, and took the bus to school with the same old bag. Only when she touched a piano did she feel that spark again, that special magic that only music could bring. One afternoon, Mrs. Evans visited their small apartment for tea. She looked around the tiny room, the cracked walls, the small table, the window with torn curtains, and then at Lena, who sat playing on a small keyboard Mr. Hamilton had gifted her. "You've come a long way, my dear," Mrs. Evans said softly. "And this is just the beginning." Lena smiled shyly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming, miss," Mrs. Evans chuckled. "Then keep dreaming. But remember, fame can be loud. Don't let it drown your music." Lena nodded, not fully understanding then, but she would one day. A week later, Mr. Hamilton invited them back to the mansion. The ballroom was just as grand as before, but quieter this time. No guests, no music, only the ticking of the tall clock near the wall. Mr. Hamilton looked older that day, a gentle sadness in his eyes. "Lena," he said, "you've made us proud. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that music is not about wealth but about soul." He led her to the piano. "Do you know," he continued, "this piano belonged to my daughter? She loved it more than anything. When she passed away, I couldn't bear to hear it played again. Until that night when you touched the keys. For the first time in years, it didn't sound sad." Lena felt tears sting her eyes. "I didn't know, sir." "I'm sorry," he smiled. "Don't be. You brought her spirit back. You brought light into this house again." He paused, then added, "This piano, it should belong to someone who will love it the way she did." "Someone like you," Lena gasped. "Sir, I can't." "Yes, you can," he interrupted gently. "It's yours." Her mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We can't accept something so expensive." But Mr. Hamilton only smiled. "You can't put a price on hope, Maria. Let her keep it." Lena touched the piano's smooth surface, her reflection shining faintly on it. "I promise I'll never stop playing," she whispered. That night, when the piano arrived at their small apartment, the entire neighborhood gathered outside to watch. Children gasped, adults whispered, and Maria cried quietly as the men set it up in the corner of their tiny living room. It looked almost too beautiful for the little space, like a piece of heaven had fallen into their home. When everyone left, Lena sat on the stool and ran her fingers across the keys. She didn't play for applause this time. She played softly, just for herself, for her father, for her mother, and for the man who had believed in her. The music drifted out through the open window into the cool night air. People walking by stopped to listen. Some smiled. Some felt tears they couldn't explain. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was something purer, the sound of a heart speaking through music. As the final note faded, Lena sat still, eyes closed. The silence after the song felt like an embrace, warm, peaceful, full of love. Her mother whispered from the kitchen, "Lena." "Yes, Mama?" Maria smiled softly. "You played like the world was listening." Lena looked out the window at the stars. Maybe it was. Later that night, she placed her scholarship certificate on the piano and touched it gently. "Papa," she whispered, "I made it this far. But I'll go further. I'll make sure the world hears our song." A small breeze slipped through the window, lifting the curtain slightly. She smiled, believing it was his answer. And as the moonlight touched the keys, the piano seemed to glow, waiting just like her, for the next note of her journey. Months passed, but the magic of that night never faded. Every time Lena sat at her piano, the memory of the applause echoed softly in her heart. But now the sound didn't fill her with pride. It filled her with peace. The small apartment that once felt dull now glowed with life. The piano stood proudly by the window, its black surface reflecting sunlight during the day and the stars at night. It wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was a part of their family, a promise, a hope, a dream come true. Maria worked fewer hours now. Mr. Hamilton had increased her pay and even arranged music lessons for Lena at the city academy. Their lives were still simple, but no longer heavy with worry. For the first time, the future didn't look like a wall. It looked like a road, long, shining, and open. The City Music Academy was a new world for Lena, She was surrounded by talented students, teachers with kind smiles and halls that echoed with melodies all day long. But even there, people whispered about her. She's the poor girl from the paper, some said. She's lucky Mr. Hamilton noticed her. Others added. At first, the words stung like little needles. But Lena remembered what her mother always said. Let their words fall behind you, not ahead of you. So she did. She kept her head down and her heart up, and she played. She practiced until her fingers were sore, stayed late in the quiet halls when everyone else had gone home, and smiled at the janitors who listened from afar. Slowly her name became known, not as the poor girl anymore, but as the girl who played with her soul. One afternoon, Mrs. Evans visited her class. She had a surprise. Lena, she said, you've been invited to perform at the city youth concert. The mayor will be there, and so will the city's orchestra conductor. Lena gasped. Me, really? Mrs. Evans nodded. They heard about your scholarship performance. They want you to play your own composition this time. My own, Lena whispered, but I've never written a full song. Then it's time you did, Mrs. Evans smiled. You've lived enough to have something to say. That night, Lena sat by her piano staring at the keys. She didn't know where to begin. She touched one note, nowhere to begin. She touched one note,